I am so thankful to have this opportunity to speak with you, and particularly to speak with you on this topic of teens and technology and how to raise them through this technology age, because this has been a relevant topic and just continues to grow in its relevancy as more and more technology becomes available, and we see this increasing in the lives of students. And so again, I'm very excited to get to address this with you. And so as we approach it, let us start where we should always seek to start, with Scripture. And so if you'll turn with me to Matthew chapter 5. And in Matthew chapter 5, we'll be looking at verses 27 through 30 throughout this time. And we have this moment where Jesus is speaking with his disciples and delivering this famous sermon, right? The Sermon on the Mount. And it's this sermon filled with wisdom and instruction, this great teaching. And in that section, I want to focus in on these four verses, right? Verses 27 through 30. Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 30. Jesus says, verse 27, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.'" So Jesus is saying, you've heard this, you know this, you understand this idea. You've heard this concept of right and wrong. What is a sin, particularly related to adultery? Okay, right, we are with you. Go on to verse 28. But, so in contrast to what was laid out before, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So you see, in contrast to what you have heard and know to be true about this sin, Jesus magnifies the level of accountability. It was clearly understood that adultery was a sin, but Jesus is saying, I'm holding you to a higher standard. I want to look at your heart, that realize, although the act is a sin, the real sin is in your heart. Even if you look on someone with lustful intent, this is adultery. This is sinful. Okay, well, that's very serious. Because we face temptations to sin, and let's think particularly on this sin, to lust all the time. So what do we do? What do I do? Well, Jesus then offers the response in these next verses 29 through 30. I'm going to read those. "If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it's better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it's better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell." Do you hear the weight of the response to that sin? If your eye or your hand causes you to sin, tear it out. Cut it off. It is better to go without those, which are two vitally important parts of the body. Better to go without an eye or a hand than it is to go to hell. We have this firm warning with a firm response. And we hear some deep truths within this. First, hear that sin is serious. Very serious. And you've known that. You have heard that. We understand that. Your holiness is serious. Very serious. That you, as a follower of Christ, are called to be holy as the Lord your God is holy. And you should take that very seriously. So, your response should be serious. Very serious. We see the seriousness of sin, of our pursuit of holiness, and of our response to temptation and sin. Okay, so why look at this passage in relation to teens and technology? Let's just look through some current trends, right? Because the use of technology by minors, by our students, by teens is overwhelming. I just want to use some statistics from 2018. So we're now talking 3 years ago. In that time, 25% of children under the age of 6 had a smartphone. 25%, 1 in 4 under the age of 6 already had a smartphone. You keep going. 53% of children aged 3 to 4 were going online nearly 8 hours a week. 79% of children aged 5 through 7 were going online nearly 9 hours a week. 94% of children 8 through 11 go online 13 and a half hours a week. 99% of children 12 to 15 were going online 21 hours a week. You're talking 21 hours per week of your child's life in 2018. 99% of them were spending those hours online. And we know that access to that technology is only growing. That most teens that you're likely associated with have a phone or a gaming console or a television or a computer or a combination of all of those or access to all of those. Hear this, within 1 minute in the year 2020, in 1 minute, there were over 19 million texts sent, over 4.7 million videos watched on YouTube, 2.5 million Snapchats sent, over 650,000 images scrolled through on Instagram. And the list goes on and on. That's in 1 minute in 2020. We see that so many people are active on technology, and your child is likely one of them or is tempted to be one of them. So, is this a big deal? Is this such a big problem? Well, we could look further into the Sermon on the Mount. We could go to chapter 6, verses 19 through 24, and talk about storing up treasures on earth that would fade away or serving two masters. And I do believe we should keep that in mind, but let us think on the text that we looked at, 5:27 through 30. That we should not commit adultery, not look on someone lustfully, for this is a sin in our heart, this seriousness. As it stands now, the average age, or where it's starting, where most students come into contact with pornography for the first time, is 8. 8 years to 10 years is what some of the statistics are saying, is the age where most students are now coming into contact with pornography for the first time. Beyond that, when we think beyond just this idea, the sin of lust, we think to other sins, the statistics regarding depression, thoughts of suicide, self-esteem, and their relation to social media and internet use is staggering. That as the use of technology increases, the likelihood of your child to struggle with those issues increases. So, if the ability to access this technology is greater than ever, this is an issue we must deal with. But what can we do? What can you do? Well, again, look at our passage, particularly look at verses 29 through 30. We are not to toy with sin. We are not to toy with an unhealthy use of technology. And hear that God gave us technology for our good and His glory. But as we handle this, we should not take it lightly. If it is destructive, we are not to keep it around and see what happens. Our methods should be serious and aggressive. Why? Because this is a serious matter. Your child's eternity is at stake. And so with that in mind, keeping our passage by us, I want us to hear 7 practical recommendations for parenting teens on technology. 7 practical recommendations for parenting teens on technology. First recommendation is to open dialogue. Open dialogue. Have regular communication established in your family. Establish these regular family rhythms where you and your children talk about matters of real value. Make it a habit for you to have conversations on weighty matters, to talk with them, to discuss that, so that you are talking with your children about technology. You're talking with your children about sin. You're talking with your children about the dangers of sin, of technology. And as you do this, as you have these discussions, make sure you're doing so in a loving manner, that it's not just, hey, it's teaching time. Hey, it's me telling you how wrong you are or how weak you. No, you do this in a loving manner so that as you navigate this road together, your children are working with, growing with, being sanctified with you, and not just seeing this as a totalitarian regime bringing oppression down upon them. Open dialogue with your family. This will be beneficial beyond just the topic of technology. It will help you in so many other areas, but it lays the groundwork in particular for this as you go forward. So, open communication with your family and work on making that a part of your regular habits. Second practical recommendation is to educate yourself. Educate yourself, because realize that those statistics on technology use are continuing to happen whether you are participating in them or not. And realize, again, the weight of what your children are potentially taking in. Pornography, graphic material, harmful worldviews, damaging habits, it goes on. And so you should see that and hear this call to stay informed. Stay informed. I want to talk about that in three ways. Stay informed, one, personally. You want to stay up to date on what your child is accessing. So personally, in regards to your family, are you aware of what apps your child has on their phone? Are you aware of what video games they're playing? Are you aware of what shows they are watching, what they are looking at on the internet? Do not stand idly by as your children roam the technology world. And here, you don't have to be a helicopter parent to be involved in that. But again, this helps with having open dialogue because you can talk about this. But you need to know what your family is participating in. Make sure you are staying up to date on that. Be honest. Do you have any clue what's going on? And once you know that, secondly, you want to informationally educate yourself on what they are doing. Right? So you know what they have. Now figure out, okay, I know what they have. What is that? What does that mean? Like, for example, if your child says, hey, I have TikTok on my phone, and you ask, okay, well, what is that? And they say, it's an app where people post funny dance videos. You do not know what all is on that site. That answer is incomplete and unhelpful, in some ways dishonest, right? You need to be aware of what they have access to. If they say they have these apps, know what those apps are. If they say they're getting this game, know what that involves. If they're going to watch this movie, watch this show, make sure you fill yourself in on the details of it and don't just go, well, I may be out of touch, I just don't know. Or don't just take their word for it. Fill yourself in. There's plenty of ways to learn about that. You can talk to other parents. You can talk to students. You can talk to your student and hopefully pry out some greater detail on that. There's a website, nationalonlinesafety.com, has some great resources to inform you on apps. But make sure that you are filling your mind with what is true of these apps and games and videos and places your family's accessing. So know what they're accessing, know what is within that, and then spiritually, third, prepare yourself, grow in knowledge. You need to know what is right and what is true and what is sinful and what is harmful so that you be prepared to identify problems and take a stand against anything that's harming your family. Hear this as a call to be so drenched in the gospel yourself that you are ready to fight for your family for the glory of God. Keep yourself knowledgeable so that you be prepared for this battle. Our third practical recommendation that I want to give as we get ready to go into other recommendations is prepare to be an oddity. Prepare yourself to be an oddity, to be a bit on the outside of the norm, right? That as you start making decisions like this is going to make you a bit different from other people. Now, as a Christian, as a follower of Christ, you should already somewhat feel this. You should already somewhat feel, okay, I'm different, that we are called to a higher standard, that I am outside of this world. This world is not my home. Well, you should be prepared to feel this again. Because here, if you start taking a hard stance on the how and what of technology with your children, you will be an oddity. You'll be different. You'll have families say, wait, your children are doing what? Wait, your rules on technology are what? And then you may even get this pressure from your children saying, but mom, their family's allowed to do this, or dad, they're allowed to have this. You see, now, I'm not calling you to intentionally live your life as a weirdo, but I'm just calling you to be prepared to face the pressures of stepping outside of the norm. Because here, pursuing holiness and establishing order in relation to technology that helps your family pursue holiness is an oddity. But hear me, it is so worthwhile. Because we see it's been laid out in God's word for our good. Our hearts, our children's hearts are in need of help, and it is worth pursuing, but make sure you're prepared mentally to stand strong despite how odd you may be looked at. Fourth practical recommendation is to set boundaries. This is the one we may have been thinking of. This is the big one. Let's look again at verses 29 and 30. If your eye or your hand causes you to sin, do what? Cut it off. Tear it out. You hear that? It's so aggressive yet so clear. And how many of us know that technology is destroying these students, destroying our children, yet we keep thinking, they're fine. Well, my children don't deal with that. Surely they don't. Or having that and having access to that, it's just the norm now. They've got to be raised on what's normal. They've got to fit in. Or I don't want them to be weird. Or it just isn't that big of a deal. Here, parent, if that is your response, you are toying with your children's soul. Cut it off. So that asks the question, what boundaries to technology do you have in place? I want to think about that in three areas of boundaries. The first would be location. What locations have you set boundaries on for technology? Because I highly encourage you to add no phone zones or no technology zones to your home and to the regularity of your family. One that I highly recommend is at the table. When you are eating, whether at home or out, I want you to just really think about it. When was the last time you had a nice technology-free meal together as a family? Sitting around the table, communicating. Not sitting in front of the TV, not having somebody just sitting on their phone. When was the last time that happened? I watched that again this weekend. It was Mother's Day. I saw a family out celebrating, and the entire time they were sitting with this person who's poured into them, the children just sat on their phones. Have you established your time of family gathering as a time where there will be no technology? Set it up as a no phone zone. Here's another spot. What about in their bedrooms? In their rooms. Set that place as a no technology area. Oh, well, that seems a bit extreme. Well, think about this. If you knew that there was a sexual predator attacking your area, would you invite them to come over and hang out in your children's room? Well, of course not. Of course you wouldn't, because you love them and care about them. But knowing what we know about technology, about the internet, about social media, about the effect it has, and about our own frailty and weakness and sinfulness, why would we leave our child alone in a room and kick open the doors to the internet and place it all at their fingertips? you are trying to throw them into a fire and hope they do not get burned. Parents, your children should not be using their phone alone in their room. Your children should not have a computer alone in their room, should not have a television alone in their room, should not be playing games alone in their room, for that is building temptation to pursue sin. Some great ways to work on this is to make charging stations in a main area of the house. If they want their phone to be recharged, they've got to plug it in the main room, or every night that's where their phone needs to be before they go to bed. Implementing ideas like this are easy and helpful. And what about games and computers? If they're not in their room, we'll put them in a main family room and put them facing the main family room so they can't sit in a corner with it facing away. That way, they are always utilizing that technology in front of the eyes of others. Because you want to establish your home as a place of community, fellowship, and purity, not a place that is driven by technology. So worry about location, set boundaries on location, set boundaries on time. It is worthwhile to set restrictions on how much your children can use technology. Maybe they have to earn that time with chores, or maybe they earn it with reading or accomplishing schoolwork, whatever it may be. It may be that you set only on certain days at certain times. You just want to make sure that they are not worshiping a second master, that they are not building up treasure that is absolutely worthless. Another practical way to do this is that you can set real time limits on their phones via your phone. I know a parent that has set this for their children, and in order to get more access to apps, a parent has to put in a passcode that the children don't have. They literally are not able to overuse their phone. And there's plenty of ways that you can do this. Just make sure that you are monitoring how much time your children are utilizing technology. So we want boundaries on their time, we want boundaries on location, and also we want boundaries on their access. So of what they can get to and what they can do. There's several great apps that can help with this, like Covenant Eyes, Guardian, or Bark, and maybe others that limit what they can see or do or talk about and will send you updates. You can also work on limiting what apps that they can or can't have via passcodes, or you can establish rules yourself. If you're thinking that your sons are not going to look at promiscuous images, are not able to look at promiscuous images through Instagram or Twitter, you don't know all that those apps are capable of. If you think your daughter can't do the same, or you think your daughter won't depress herself through comparison on those same apps, you don't know what those apps are capable of. I would encourage running from that and encourage waiting to ever let your child have one of those. Apps like TikTok or Snapchat, I would really never recommend having those on their phones. But if you decide, say, that you want them to have an Instagram or Twitter, my encouragement would be let them utilize that through your internet browser. So like a Covenant Eyes on their phone would serve as an internet browser, and not have the apps. That way their usage of that app is constantly tracked. Because otherwise, they can just run wild, run free on that app with no regulations. So, we want to put boundaries around location, around time spent, and around access to technology. And then I just encourage you, as you're looking at those boundaries, to just utilize wisdom over time. That as your children get older, as your children demonstrate responsibility, you may say, okay, I'm going to change this for my 17-year-old, for my 18-year-old. They maybe can use their phone at this time and in this location. As you see that demonstrated, you can peel back the layers, but make sure you do that through prayer and guidance, and make sure that they know what they are facing, which is our next practical recommendation. Our fifth one is to communicate reasons for boundaries. Communicate your reasons for the boundaries, that if you simply lay out restrictions for the sake of restrictions, nothing will ultimately be accomplished. I watched this documentary where there was a zoo that was trying to keep in an animal. It was this badger, and what happened is it would utilize what was around it to get around their barriers and escape. So they just kept adding in more barriers, and all that badger would keep doing was working its way around and utilizing other resources to escape from its pen. Well, the problem was that no matter what they did, that badger was always going to be a badger. It was going to continue to try and escape with all that it was. In the same way, if all we do is set out restrictions and tell our children, these are just here to keep you in this place, we are not addressing the heart, which is what's being addressed in our passage. Adultery itself wasn't necessarily the problem, although it's very sinful. The problem was a heart issue. That's what we want to explain and address with our children. God's law was given to his people because he is holy, and his people are to be holy, so his word is for their good and his glory. So with that in mind, be open with your children about why you do what you do. Be open with them about the dangers of technology. Be open with them about the dangers of pornography. Talk to them about the emotional dangers of excessive social media use. Talk to them about the damaging habits built of excessive time spent on technology. Talk to them about why your family's approach to technology might look different to others. Make sure you're giving reasons behind all that you do. One helpful recommendation, there's a practical step you can take towards this, is to write out and have your children sign a technology covenant. I've seen this written out, and it helps them understand and then verbalize their commitment to view technology in a faithful way. Because you want to make sure your children understand that this is not just to be restrictive. It's like the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. This isn't just to get out of hell. It isn't just an avoidance strategy, but it is because Jesus is worthy of worship and praise through all that we are, and he is our only hope in life and death. We want to see that, and we want to make sure our children see why we do what we do. So, set boundaries, but also explain your boundaries. Practical recommendation number 6. After all this, go that way yourself. Hear that. Go that way yourself. I've learned that if there's anything I want to say, Charles Spurgeon has said it better. He says, train up a child in the way he should go, but be sure you go that way yourself. Right? Make sure we don't hear of this topic, think on this and say, yeah, we need to chop off their hand. We need to tear out their eye. Well, yours is dragging you to hell. You see, I've watched parents complain about their child's rampant technology use while hardly living without their own nose out of their phone. They complain about their children being obsessed with technology while they themselves can't live a moment without it. Do not let this be another topic that's do as I say, not as I do. Do you want to see a difference in the way your family looks at technology? Lead them in it. Do you want to see a difference in the way your family worships the Lord with their time? Lead them in that. Limit your own use. Worship the Lord more and watch and see how well your family follows. Go that way yourself. And then our final practical recommendation is to go that way together. To go that way together. You want to make this process easier? Lock arms with other families and run together. As you're working through this, learn from them what's worked for them, what hasn't. Pray for them as they struggle through it or as they rejoice in it, and be there for them throughout the process. Remember those complaints that you may hear from families or from your children of why are we different or why are you different? If you're running in this together, it really helps with a lot of that. So talk with other parents after this session. I encourage you, have a specific conversation about what your plan is, what their plan is. I'll provide some recommended resources. I encourage you to take a look at those. Pick a book on technology and being faithful with that and read it together. Talk about how you can apply it at your home. I just want to give you 2 final questions to dwell on as we think on this whole topic. What is your specific plan to establish technology boundaries at home? Hear that if we just run away and say, hey, I want to use less tech at home, and we don't make a specific plan, it's not likely to happen. What is your specific plan to establish technology boundaries at home? Another question. What is your specific plan to be held accountable for those boundaries? How can you fall on another family or a pastor or a friend to press you in that, to check on you in that, to make sure you haven't gone, okay, this is great, and then fallen off quickly? Find someone to hold you accountable. What's your specific plan to be held accountable for those boundaries? 4, the Lord is worthy of all of our worship and praise. He is worthy of us treasuring Him above anything, especially technology. He is far greater and far more worthy of our time and our worship, no matter what the cost may be.